Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Makeup or Breakup. Hey, Lou, how's it going?
Not bad, not bad. We're a little late. We get caught up in the conversation before the show.
That's right. It's okay.
Yeah.
We can be a little late because it's our show. We can because we did.
That's right.
But we are back to Makeup or Breakup. We've been having some great conversations over the last few months about being single, about dating, about asking the right questions before you get married. I say do it before you're even engaged. We had a great travel agent on here who was talking about what I really enjoyed was the plethora of Disney options and how it really isn't just for kids, even though that was the visual that I always had regarding Disney. But
right, and the way to do a singles cruise without doing a singles cruise. I thought that was interesting too.
Right.
How much single activity there is, activity for singles there are on normal cruises, even Disney cruises.
Right. And so I think we've had some great conversations on that. And we'll, excuse me, we will circle back.
When are we going to go back and do profiles? I want to do that again.
I know we have to do profiles. Maybe we'll do single profiles next week.
Yeah.
So we have to have pictures, and maybe we can figure out ahead of time how to do the screen sharing, or I can send you some profiles and then you can have them ready to screen share.
Yeah.
That would be kind of fun.
Yep.
That'd be
takes
fun.
me back to my online dating days.
Right. I'll do that. I'll work on that next weekend, or this week I'll send you some things.
Yeah. All right.
I'll write that down. Profiles for next week.
Yeah.
And that's something that we've talked about before. And it's so much fun to do that, to go back and do that, because the reason why people hire me for the date coaching is because dating is difficult. Even 20 years ago, it wasn't fun, right? It's never really fun. It's fun when you're in an abundance mode and, you've got choices and you're finding people that are roughly your age and you're finding people that have similar interests. But as we get older and we're not hanging out with all the same people, and our kids aren't in school, so we're not meeting other single moms and dads, right?
Right.
In some respects, I feel as we get older, it does get harder to date because we're not in a lot of the same circles that we used to be in. Or maybe we're so busy as a single parent, we're not we're not in the ski club anymore, right?
Yep.
Or we're not going out dancing with our friends, or we're not doing like things that we really enjoy. And that's why it's so important. I always tell people, it's kind of like, I know, preaching to the choir with you and me, but don't give up on having hobbies, things that you enjoy doing, because you do start to lose connection with other adults.
Right. And
that's a critical thing, whether you're single or married, because how many married people do we know that stop going out? They won't even, married people are like, I never could latch onto this, but a lot of married people only go out if they're with another married couple. Yeah. I'm like, what's with that? Like, don't you remember when you were single? Like, that wasn't cool.
But
like,
listen, the whole parenthood thing it's kind in a way, it's kind of a black hole, because it sucks you into being a parent and you tend to drop off almost everything else. I mean, basically you do your career and you do your parenting, and you forget about socializing, you forget about having friends, you forget about hobbies, you forget about interests, attractions, things that you like to do. A lot of people get sucked into that, and it just makes things difficult, because again, you're giving yourself over to the parent a lot, which obviously you want to take care of your kids, and that's an important thing, but you can do that and keep yourself. And in fact, it's better parenting when you keep yourself.
Right. The thing is, we talk a lot about this. You have to put the oxygen mask on first, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the oxygen mask on. That includes doing self-care.
But you want to show your kids a complete person. You want to show someone who's got some interests, who has some hobbies, who has some life to show, as opposed to just being this parent. You don't want your kids to see you as just a parent. You want to see you as a full person, a person that is has a good self-image and is doing well in life and interested in life, still excited by life.
Right. Well, and one of the ways that I tell people to do this, especially if they're like a single parent, during the homework time, so theoretically you've got time after dinner or before dinner, that's, whatever it is, the 45 minutes, hour and a half that's designated for homework, have that be your time too. And so if you're a single mom or a single dad, or even if you're married, you can say to your kids, okay, while you're on your computers and you're doing your homework, I'm going to be taking, I'm going to be joining my group. So maybe you're in a book club online.
Yep.
Or you're taking a class. Like that could be your time to take another module of your online class.
Right.
Allow that to be.
Just do a yoga class or something. Just go and do a yoga.
I was even thinking that. That's so funny that you said that. Yeah. And actually, if the kids are older and the yoga class is like up the street or something, they could be alone for part of that time while you go to your class.
Right.
But, normally and I was sort of a victim of it. I mean, I was guilty of it. I should say I wasn't a victim, but I would find myself when my son was doing his homework, I wanted to be nearby in case he had a question. So I'd be in the kitchen cleaning or cooking or, wasn't doing anything for myself during that time, but that's just silly.
Right. Yep.
It should be, look, this is when we all get to do our stuff, whatever it is. But it's important for people to remember that.
I think so too. And I think modeling a full life is, and modeling a solid, full person is good for the kids. I think it's important. I think you're a better parent when you have a life as well. And it's really easy to just get sucked into just being a parent.
Right. Absolutely. So I thought today we could segue for one. We'll just do it for today anyway. We'll get out of the single conversation and 1,000 things that you should be asking your loved one before you get married. And we're going to segue back into just generalized relationships. And I started thinking about, which I think this is what I had talked about a week or two ago. I was talking about how we had touched several times over the last couple of years, we had touched on the topic of narcissism. And one of the difficulties with narcissism is that in today's day and age, it's just like the go-to phrase, right? It's the go-to label for someone that we think is all about themselves.
Right.
And you and I know that's not the case, because as it really actually turns out, narcissism is much more complex. And I always tell people, even if the therapist says, by all intents and purposes, you're married to a narcissist, until that spouse is diagnosed by a professional, there are many other things that mask a true identity and, I would say, description that doesn't necessarily have to be narcissism.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. And so today I just wanted to talk a little bit about, a couple of years ago, I know I mentioned this, but there's a phenomenal book. It's one of the best books, and it's one of the leading professionals who wrote it. One of the leading experts, I'm going to say, on narcissism. And her name, she's from, hold on a minute. She's from the Netherlands or something. She's,
they have narcissists in the Netherlands?
No, she's got an interesting name. I think she's originally from somewhere else. But anyway, it's called Healing from a Narcissistic Relationship, a Caretaker's Guide to Recovery, Empowerment, and Transformation. And it's by Margulies, I don't know how to say her name, but Felstad.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
I think you did well. That looks like Felstad, yeah.
Felstad. This book is phenomenal. And I'm going to read.
I'm interested in your thoughts on this, because we talked about this, I think, a week or two ago about this, and you just mentioned it again, that a lot of people put the label of narcissist on their partner, their exes, because it's easy. It passes the buck. It lays all the blame on them, and I couldn't do anything, and it's an easy way to do it. But not all of them are narcissists. But by the same token, chances are your ex displayed some degree of self-interest,
right,
in the breakup and the deterioration of the relationship, and it became a problem. Whether it rose to the narcissist level or not, that's a whole nother discussion. But I'm guessing this book can be helpful for all those degrees of situations where your partner just was a little bit more self-involved than the relationship could stand. Again, probably not a narcissist, but still you can heal from that type of wound, because that's difficult for you when you don't feel your partner is paying any attention to you or putting any stock in you or including you in a relationship at all.
Right. And on the inside of the cover jacket, it starts out with the perfect summary of what this book is really attempting. When a relationship with a narcissist ends, the caretaking partner is often left confused, deeply hurt, and often still emotionally connected, while the narcissist seems to easily move on to the next relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So in this book, this woman is offering guidance about what to expect as the relationship unravels and how to cope with the fallout. It also helps the reader learn to truly disengage and move through the grief process, because you're grieving not just the loss of relationship, but often loss of self, because you spent so much of your time and energy and yourself pouring into this relationship to make it better, to change the person, to deal with a person that's, predictably unpredictable or predictably, self-fulfilling all the time. Right?
Another thing that's difficult about ending a relationship with a narcissist is that it's probably not the first ending. You've probably gone through this cycle many times, so it's hard to decide what the final point is when this is the final time this is going to happen. You always tend to think, well, we've gone through this before. We're gonna make up, and we'll go at it again.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So this book is specifically for people typically, specifically who have gone through being with a narcissist, and now they're, it's the after effect, right? What she calls the fallout. So I'm going to read the introduction because it's a little bit long, but rather than try to summarize it, I think it really explains what this book is all about and why it's so critical to have a book like this and to really work with someone. I mean, when I'm working with people, I'm often working them through these concepts that are in this book. If I feel like they truly are with a narcissist or they are separating and divorcing a narcissist. So, I am on the lookout for narcissism when I'm working with couples as well.
Yep.
Right. Because I've got to call these things out, and I have to be able to say, your views are your views, but they don't necessarily fit well into a relationship. And so right now I have a couple, he has his views. He thinks his views are right. He thinks that his wife should go along with things that he's proposing.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, when you're a couple, you don't get to do that anyway when you're part of a couple.
Right.
So even if it had nothing to do with their particular topics, his attitude toward what it means to be a supportive, quote unquote, spouse is not quite on target.
In a relationship, being right isn't always enough, right? There's got to be a balance. There's got to be compromise. And, by the way, in many situations in a relationship, both people can be right because they're concerned with their specific needs, and those needs exist. Regardless of who you think should win, those needs exist, and you kind of have to accommodate them, don't you?
Right. We do. And I mean, how many times have we heard like the conflict with money? It's like, you may be right that Jane isn't recording checks. She's a spendthrift. She's blowing through money. So she may be right, but that doesn't mean that you take over all the finances and, it's like a done deal. It's kind of like, I've seen people do that.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, the reason why I took over the checkbook and started paying all the bills and things is because she was terrible at it, or he was terrible at it.
Yep.
And I'm like, on a basic level, that's correct. But how you handle that and just sort of like shut the door on the other person, like, okay, I'm taking over. You may think you're being kind and you're taking it off their plate, but they don't necessarily feel that.
Right.
And I also feel strongly about the fact that both people in a marriage have to be part of the financial process. So I don't like it. I'm not good at it, but even I try to stay involved with it in my own marriage because I know I have to, right? So knowledge is power. I need to have knowledge. If something happens to my husband, God forbid, I have to know where everything is. Even if he writes the checks, I'm fine with that. You can pay the bills with the money. I don't really care. But I need to know what those are and where they're going and how often are you doing it? And where's the checkbook?
Plus, understanding what's going on. For example, if you're not part of the financial situation, if the wife's not part of the financial situation and she's constantly hitting the husband, we got to do the bathroom over. We got to do the bathroom over. The husband knows the financial situation. It's like, no, not now. She's not wrong that the bathroom needs to be done over, but there are other considerations that are involved because she's not involved in the finances. She doesn't understand what an ask that is because right now, financially, they can't afford to redo the bathroom.
Right. Exactly. So it's very important for people to be conscious of the fact that while they may give up an activity or a chore, within the marriage. That's perfectly normal to split things, obviously. It's also better, in my opinion, with finances. What I tell people, the best solution really is to get the other person who's not comfortable with the finances into a better comfort zone, instead of just doing everything and just saying, hey, it's all taken care of. You don't have to think about the mortgage payment, stuff like that. Switch every month so that they get used to it. So switch off every month with one person writing the bills, the other person writes the bills. And yeah, Jane or Bill, who don't usually do that, need to be shown what the process is. And, where's a spreadsheet? Like my husband keeps a spreadsheet. So where's he putting on the spreadsheet that he paid this for electric and this for the mortgage?
How many times have you run into a couple where one of the couple or the other doesn't know what the mortgage payment is?
Always.
Yeah.
A lot of time, like 80%.
Yeah. So how do you have a cohesive money policy between the two of you if you don't know the basics of what the electricity bill is, what the mortgage bill is, how much insurance we're buying on a month-to-month basis? If you don't have that knowledge, you can't converse effectively. You can't cooperate with each other if one person doesn't have this basic knowledge.
Right. You have to have that. Mm-hmm. And in a non-condescending way, it's important for the one that does the finances, that the one that has the checkbook responsibility, to explain it to the other person. That was a big problem with my first marriage, I have to say. I couldn't put my finger on it until it was too late, and I was just checked out because I was so frustrated. But honestly, if I'd been able to verbalize a little bit better at age 30 or whatever, my frustration was that I felt like, I was shut out from writing checks, and I wasn't mature enough to be able to, and I didn't have someone like me in my life to say, hey, Alan, she's feeling anxious because she doesn't know what's going on with the checkbook. It's not that I didn't trust him. Right. I just felt like it was this whole unknown entity, and I started to resent it. I kind of resented the fact that he wouldn't at least educate me on it. Like, okay, educate me on what you do. Like my husband, he does the checkbook, but he also does a spreadsheet. Not everybody does a spreadsheet.
Right.
I will say, though, the spreadsheet is much easier for a visual.
Sure.
Because it's like monthly columns, and then, on the left of the grid are the items.
It's funny. My ex-wife and I had the opposite situation, and it was really funny. It didn't turn out to be one of the things that was the biggest problem to us, but she was handling the checkbook and paying the bills and stuff like that. She was very stressed out by it, and it's not like I didn't know what was going on. It's just how it evolved from the beginning of the relationship. And at a certain point, she said, "You got to take on some of this." I goes, "No problem." And so I took it on for a few months, and she's like, "I can't handle this. I got to take it back." And it's not, I didn't get the impression it was because I was having problems with it, because I wasn't. It was because she needed that control, didn't like giving it up, but didn't like having it either. So we struggled finding the balance so that she didn't feel totally stressed out by it, but still felt she had a hand in it. That was an interesting little dance, because for a while, you do it. And I goes, "Okay, I'll do it." And I did it. And then no, I got to take it back. That type of thing. So finances are a funny thing. And usually, like you said, most of the time it's like one side of the couple just has no clue what's going on. And where money is one of the biggest stressors, when both couples aren't really involved in the finances to the extent where they have the basic knowledge, that becomes a problem. It has to become a problem.
It becomes a problem, and it becomes an even bigger problem when you're going through a separation or divorce, God forbid, because you often find out, wow, I was getting $100 a week, but it was for the groceries and the gas. Bill was Jane they were taking out $150 a week, and they were eating out. Like, where's the fairness there? Like, my allowance was for the family. Their allowance went to themselves.
The allowance thing is funny too. I was thinking of that in your first example. It's like when one of the couple gets put on an allowance, it's just funny.
I know.
It's not a good situation.
It would be a better word to say budget.
Yeah.
We're going to budget our blow money each week will be an agreed $100 each or whatever it is.
But think of the situation that puts you in. You have your allowance, and if you spend your allowance, something happens, and you got to go back. You got to crawl back to the other side of the couple and ask for more money. I mean, how can that be a positive situation?
Yeah, it's kind of hard. That's why it's always good to have 3 accounts, like the checking account that you both contribute to for the bills, and then you each have your own account. But in the mutual account, you're agreeing that not just putting money in for the bills, but maybe money that goes in like extra money toward the 401k or some kind of a retirement fund, because you can't have the two individual accounts be free money.
Right.
Because then like you only have the bill money and then the rest of it gets blown away.
Yep.
So you have to be careful of that. But I'm going to read for a couple of minutes the introduction to this phenomenal book, Healing from a Narcissistic Relationship. And it really sets up the tone for what's going on in here. And then I'm going to read out the table of contents, because the table of contents is what we're going to talk about. And we're going to talk about some of the things that she really identifies with people who were the victim of a narcissist, right? The one that was pulled into that web,
Right.
right? Because there's all this damage that you have, and you have to figure out how to untangle it and to move on. Because otherwise, just like any bad relationship, if you don't heal it and figure it all out, you're going to move on in a really damaged way, right?
And if you don't process the damage, the chances are you're going to end up with another narcissist. Right.
And so we often say in the divorce care program that I run, which is the support group, which, by the way, people can join. It's on Monday nights. If you're separated, going through a divorce, or you're post-divorce, but you're still upset, you're still not doing well, come to my online by Zoom divorce care group. It's Monday nights from 7 to 8:30. But we talk in there a lot about the example of breaking your leg. If you're a marathon runner and you break your leg, yes, you go to the doctors, you put a cast on it, but you don't start running right away. First, you have to rest and do nothing and heal. And then slowly you can walk a few steps, walk a little further. You're not going to start running again for several months, right?
Right.
But if you get the cast on and you start running because you think, well, I've got a cast, so my leg's protected,
yeah,
you're going to do more damage by going too quickly and not taking the time to heal, right? So that's the visual. And you're going to do so much more damage that you're going to end up back at the doctor's, which for me would be back with Coach Judith. And you're going to have to do coach time.
Yep.
Coach time. And you're going to have to repeat your healing process and repeat all this pain to start the process all over again. But now you've taken steps backward because you've done more damage by doing damage on the damage that wasn't healed yet.
Right.
And
I liken it to physical therapy, and the surgeon will tell you physical therapy is the most important part of the procedure, because if you don't do it correctly and thoroughly, you end up with chronic problems. It never heals correctly, and you're just undoing all the good that the procedure did. So this follow through of rebuilding yourself and developing some emotional strength out of this before going back into the dating world is so important.
Exactly. And so the analogy is that getting the right help and taking the time to heal and get over your issues until you start even thinking about dating again. It's like a cast for the heart.
Yep.
You've got to take care of your emotional side, your heart, your soul, your whole being and your whole way of doing life. You've got to get over the anger, the sadness, the vengeful feelings, the rage, the depression, which is very common. And also neediness of feeling lonely.
Yeah.
To sit with loneliness until you can say, I don't feel lonely anymore. I'm enjoying being by myself.
Yep.
And we've talked about that. That's something that a lot of people don't talk about. It's like, wow, her problem is she's just angry or she's just sad all the time. She cries a lot. It's like, actually, sometimes part of their problem is loneliness, and they don't want to be alone.
Well, and that comes back to, we've discussed this a number of times, it comes back to the catastrophic viewpoint that you're always going to be alone.
Right.
I keep bringing up this meme, which was so important to me in these times. It was like, I don't want to be alone forever, but I'm okay tonight. And the ability to be okay tonight and realizing that this isn't going to be forever. Loneliness or spending time alone is much easier to handle and can actually become positive when you're not saying that you're going to be alone for the rest of your life, because that creates a major problem out of it.
Right. Exactly.
So having that perspective is so important, because dealing with your loneliness tonight is a lot easier when you know it's just tonight and it's not going to be forever than it is when you're thinking, I'm never going to find anybody again. Then it becomes catastrophic. It's so difficult to deal with. So that perspective is important.
Right. And that sort of reminds me of one of the expressions that I like to use, which is healing is a choice. Right. So when you see people that stay, you know, they just wallow in their sadness and their depression and whatever. And I'm not saying like someone that's clinically depressed, of course, but then again, if you're clinically depressed, like take the meds, you know, don't be an idiot. Clinical depression is very, very serious, you know, and it's not to be taken lightly. And, you know, it is a chemical issue, and some people sometimes need medicine. But people that become lonely tend to isolate.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the loneliness is their own fault, right? So healing's a choice. Isolating is highly unrecommended. Do not isolate. If you're going to start the road to recovery, you cannot isolate.
Well, you know, my benchmark, if you can't go out to dinner alone, you're not ready to date.
Right.
That's something you got to strive for. And I look back now and I laugh on how big a hurdle that was for me at the time. And it really shouldn't, it's not a big hurdle at all. But when you're in a post-breakup phase, or you're struggling with a relationship, then it becomes self-image. It's like, well, I'm the guy who goes out to the restaurant and eats alone. Well, no one cares. You know, no one's paying attention to you. You know, that's not who you are. You're just at but it was a huge hurdle. And I understand people coming out of a relationship, what a huge hurdle it is, because you identify as part of a couple. But it's important to get to the strength of, okay, I can go out to dinner alone. I've got no problem with that. That's a really good benchmark of when you're ready, I think. Right.
You have to be able to be okay being alone and doing things by yourself.
Yep.
Right. So back onto this book, Healing from a Narcissistic Relationship. So we're not going to unpack initially all of what a narcissist is, but the introduction is just really, this is just, you know, it's going to take me a few minutes, but it's worth it. So sit back, boys and girls, and listen to today's bedtime story. I call it a lunchtime story because it's almost 12.
Yeah. I like it, a lunchtime story.
You like that? Yeah. Sit back and relax. Get onto your little, you know, couches and little comfy chairs. Get on your poof. Or sit on the floor and do a little yoga meditative pose and close your eyes and just listen to this book. So, relationships with narcissists. They can be painful, frustrating, complicated, and totally mystifying. Nothing they say or do seems to be the same from day to day. They can be charming and loving one moment and hateful and demeaning the next. They tell you one thing and then do another. When you confront them with these discrepancies, they blame you and say you're the crazy one, and often you do end up feeling like you're crazy.
Yes.
The narcissist can swing you from emotional highs to emotional lows. The narcissist can swing you from most relationships with narcissists can be described as follows in the next few paragraphs. So here you go. This will tell you what it's like to be with a narcissist. And I have clients who are hopefully watching this because they think their spouse is a narcissist. Some of them I agree with. The relationship started out almost as a fairy tale. In the beginning, you felt adored, understood, ecstatic, and more smitten than you had ever felt before. You thought that the two of you were completely in tune and that you even shared the same thoughts, feelings, and dreams. Your partner described to you the perfect life you would share together, more wonderful than you would have dared to dream on your own. You felt a oneness with this person. The relationship progressed very quickly, and within days, you were deeply and irrevocably in love. The narcissist told you that this is the perfect relationship, and you committed yourself entirely. You were drawn in. But something changed after that point. It may have been almost instantly, or it may have taken a few months or even longer. Your oneness didn't seem to be there anymore. Your loved one became controlling selfish, angry at the drop of a hat, blaming you, and self-justifying. You no longer felt understood, and your needs seemed to be discounted and even mocked. You began to feel unheard, unappreciated, frustrated, and often depressed and anxious. You had to work hard to ignore your feelings of hurt and rejection. You tried to talk about your feelings and needs, only to be treated as if your requests were silly, unimportant, or just plain foolish. You ended up wondering what was wrong with you. What had you done to make your loved one so distant and now indifferent? You kept trying. You made accommodations. You gave more love and attention to this person. You gave in to keep the peace. You gave up your interests and even time with your friends and family to meet your loved one's expectations. You tried in every way to be the perfect spouse or the perfect partner. And you kept hoping to get that loving feeling in return. It was so confusing. You started to feel as though your whole life was being controlled by this one person. Why was your partner being so mean? And why did they seem so self-centered? You wanted some of your needs to be considered. You wanted to feel cared about. You wanted this relationship to be more equal and shared. You tried to do everything perfectly. And when that didn't work, you tried harder.
Yep.
Nothing seemed to make a difference for very long. You continually felt like the giver, your partner always demanding and taking more. And you often felt guilty that you weren't doing enough and you just couldn't get it right. We've been there, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is the cool part. Well, it's not the cool part, but this is the affirming part. The longer you're in a relationship with someone so self-centered and self-absorbed, the more you feel drained, disappointed, and hurt. The person's selfishness pushes you away, but something inside of you keeps hoping things will change and that they'll again be the person that you know they could be, like the beginning of when you first met them. They can be, you're looking forward to them once again changing and being the smart, the caring person that you first met, but who now seems to be buried most of the time. Along the way, and this is the part that really catches my clients. Along the way, you saw hopeful signs. Your partner would suddenly be just as sweet and loving and attentive as you remembered. You felt that surge of happiness and some relief that day that things were going to be all right after all.
Mm-hmm.
But all too quickly, he or she switched back into the anger and the blaming, the ignoring of your requests, ignoring you, and criticizing you when everything didn't go perfectly. Through all of this, you kept hoping things would work out. And you kept working hard to be loving and kind and to prove how much you wanted to make the relationship succeed. I'm only halfway through, but doesn't that sound familiar to people that we've dated or people we know that
Sure.
dated somebody where nothing ever seemed to work, right?
Yep.
And with a narcissist, that's the case. And I think this is really describing a lot of people that we know. And I mean, I've been in relationships like that where I'm like, yeah,
Sure.
like no matter what I did. And sometimes it's like, whether I spoke up or not. If I didn't speak up, it didn't go well. If I did speak up, it didn't go well.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And the pivotal word in all of this so far, I think, is hope. That we get desperate.
Yep.
Where we want this relationship to be good because we saw it at the beginning.
Right.
We're hoping, but you know what? A hope and a prayer isn't enough.
Yep.
Proactive.
You get tastes of it along the way. You have that beginning, and then you get glimpses of it as you go along.
Right. And it's important for people to acknowledge the fact that it's okay. It's okay to be hopeful, but you have to start making changes in yourself and getting wise input from friends that you know, like, and trust, who can speak truth to what you're feeling and seeing. And what do they think about those situations?
I know you've got more intro to go here, but as I'm listening to this and my evolution with this type of relationship and healing from it, is the key point, is the point when you start asking why you acted the way you did, not asking why they acted the way they did. It's like you start looking back on it in retrospective and you think of all the, and I'm not using this word, for lack of a better word, abuse that you took from that other person. Why did you take it and keep coming back? Why did you respond to that with more effort to keep the relationship together? What was going on with you that you reacted the way you did to that person by just hanging on and keep going? That's when you start to heal from this, when you start to understand why it was you were caught up in the web, what it is with you that needed this relationship to work, and why you put so much effort into it.
Right. And a lot of times I find with my clients, they say, because I wanted to keep the family together, because I wanted the family unit. And honestly, what people miss, which is why I love doing what I do, is I point this right out. What you're missing is you're not keeping the family together in a positive way. You're role modeling a terrible parent that will do anything to appease the mother or the father, and the kids see it.
Plus, and you can tell me if I'm wrong in this, this is amateur psychology at its best, but I'm willing to bet the people who told you that to keep the family unit together, that was rationalization for them trying to keep their relationship together.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. The relationship fed a need, and they needed something from this relationship, and they pursued it to their very strong detriment, because something was going on in them, something they needed and something they were chasing. And they're going to say to keep the family together. And I understand that. And it's probably valid to some degree, but that's basically rationalization as to why they kept pursuing this relationship. I'm guessing a lot of the time.
Well, yeah. And the bottom line is, but it wasn't getting better. And day after day, month after month, year after year, it's no longer about keeping the family together. It's because you're not making changes. And so I think they feel like, I died for the family. I kept us all together. We didn't have two houses. The kids didn't have to experience a divorce. But the bottom line is, if you don't fix this thing, they almost always end up in divorce. So it's like the very thing that you were maybe afraid of, that you thought your kids would really, kids are more resilient than we give them credit for, but in your mind, they'd be devastated. Well, yeah, maybe they are. But, I was devastated when I lost my job. I was devastated when my grandmother died. Life is about devastations and also wins and successes.
Yep.
And being in an unhealthy family is not a healthy thing.
Right.
Because now you have kids that did not see a healthy parental relationship.
Right.
So the very thing you're trying to protect is modeling incorrectly to those kids. And those kids are smart. Believe me. I always say, do the best you can where we're at now to start the improvements, because when your kid goes to therapy in their 20s and 30s, and they probably will go to therapy in their 20s and 30s, you don't want it to be about you. Let's make it about their job,
Think about what's being modeled to the kids at that point. On one end, depending on which model they're looking at and following and emulating, on the one hand, you have a dominant part of that relationship who's just abusing the other side.
I have a couple right now where one of the kids is so much like the dominating narcissistic parent.
Right. Or on the other hand, if they emulate the other side of that relationship, it's the person who's taking all this abuse, but still hanging in there, for whatever reason. It's like, it is just, I'm supposed to love the person I'm with, even if they treat me poorly. That's the other thing you're modeling, to the people who will side with that side of the relationship. But both of those are poor models,
right,
to be giving to your kids.
Well, yeah. And so this one couple that I'm working with right now, I have to explain to them every week when we meet, this is what's happened. Your son is just like you, Jane, because you're a control freak. You control everything. You don't she was the one that was doing the checkbooks and stuff, kind of like your ex-wife. And, more than just that, but those kinds of things that I can point to.
So the son's looking at it and thinking, that's a good gig. I want to be in control of everything.
Right. But now you've created a monster with your 28-year-old son.
Yeah.
And your 30-year-old daughter is like the husband. And so, not that his name is Bill, but I'm like, Bill, now you've created, a daughter who acquiesces to everybody, who's afraid to speak up, who does exactly what you do and did in your marriage.
And she's going to go out and seek being dominated like that. And the son is going to go out and seek someone he can dominate. He's not going to want to date the woman who's self-contained and has her own life and her own feelings. He's not going to be interested in her because it's going to resist his model, his ideal. He's going to go out and come up with somebody that he can totally dominate.
Right. And the problem is what you've created is not two healthy young adult kids. You've created two dysfunctional kids who are going to be in relationships that are dysfunctional because they've got this. They've created this, and they're in their late 20s now. They're not like 10.
Right.
The damage is done. And unless they go get their own therapy at some point because they have a bunch of failed relationships, or they have one relationship that breaks finally after 20 years of hell, these are not healthy young adults that you should be proud of.
We've talked about this before with kids. They go one of two ways. Your only hope is kids either emulate their parents, follow the model, or they resist the model and just go opposite of the model. And your only hope is one of them sees that's not the relationship I kind of want and avoids it like the plague. But they may not have the skills to avoid it either because all they've seen, you've grown up in this household, you've grown up with this model of a relationship. It's funny, at one point, and therapists will tell you this all the time, it's kind of funny, but they will tell you that you recreate your parents' relationship. And at one point, and this was with the woman that I thought was a narcissist. I've evolved my opinion since, but at one point I'm looking at it and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm going, this is my parents' relationship. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And it's funny, things became clear to me because I always wondered why, despite the problems my mother and father had, my father adored my mother. Despite all the problems, despite who she was, despite all her personality issues that she had, he adored her. And later in life, I always wondered why. I mean, she's just treated you like hell, for all these years. Why do you adore her? And all of a sudden I was in a position with this woman. I'm going, oh, I get it now. It's like, I know she's unhealthy. I know she's not treating me right. I know we have these issues, but it's funny. I just recreated my parents' relationship. And if people look, dispassionately, they're going to find at one point or another that they recreated their parents' relationship.
Right. Well, and the other thing is, what keeps us in those sometimes is it feels strangely familiar. There's a comfort zone there where, yeah, it's like, it's not that uncomfortable for us. It's not as uncomfortable for us in the long run as it would be for an outsider that had a healthy parenting role model situation, right?
Right, because especially with the narcissist as described in this book, this is how the situation slowly evolves. It slowly gets into this situation and you're just familiar, you're comfortable with it. You feel, and again, like I said, you've probably broken up several times or had several fights and I know how to handle this. I know how to calm her down. I know how to bring her back, that type of thing. And you just rely on that knowledge. Because you're in these tracks, you're in these cycles, and people tend to stay in their cycles because, again, it's the devil
Right. And that is the role modeling. Without being told, the role modeling was you stay in it no matter what. You're in it to win it. You take the good moments, which is probably what your dad did. You ride out the bad things, and then you take the good moments, and you try to see the things like, well, she kept the household together or whatever, or she got the kids out the door or whatever it was,
Yeah. And I don't know, that was a different generation. I mean, people married in the 50s didn't break up, didn't divorce, didn't do that type of, you were just in it, right? You're in the marriage. You made it work, especially in Italian and Irish families, right?
Right. Well, I'm assuming that like your dad was the breadwinner, so to speak, and your mom was the stay-at-home mom.
No, they were both Western Electric people, and went out and worked, and it was just it's an odd situation, but it was funny that revelation at that moment, because I always wondered with him why he felt so attached to her, and then all of a sudden I found myself in a situation where I didn't think I was being treated well, but still had that attachment, and I go, oh, okay, I get it now. It makes sense. I understand what was going on.
Right. And I think part of it really is that fear of change, fear of that unknown. If you break up, someone's going to a new house or apartment, right? The reality is income is split in half. I mean, there's all kinds of things, right? And
not fun. It's not good in a family situation with kids. It's a very difficult road, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong road.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll read a little more from my intro here on the, how to address the residuals of having been with a narcissist.
Right.
So we talked about, the last thing we talked about was that along the way you see hopeful signs, but you're constantly hoping that things are going to get better, right?
Yep.
Through all of this, you keep hoping things are going to work out, and you kept working hard to be loving and kind and accepting and just sort of like not causing waves when they do something outrageous or they say something hurtful, because you don't want to deal with the backlash of it.
Sure.
Then one day,
I used to feel all the time, it's like, I have two options here. I can be upset about what's happening, or I can speak up about it. And not only am I upset about what's happening, is she's making my life miserable for speaking up about it. So the easier path was always just be upset about what's happening and just keep it in, because it doesn't get better to talk about it. There's no positive in talking about it.
Right. And that's why the word hope is used in here so many times, right?
Yep.
But we all know that hoping alone isn't going to do anything. Changing what you do and how you react, and maybe staying or not staying, is the key part,
Yep.
So then this is interesting. Then one day, your loved one announces that this relationship just is not working. So that's usually after you push back.
Yep.
It's no longer fulfilling or exciting. You're too negative and you're needy.
Yep.
You're boring and you're not interesting. What?
You're being dramatic.
What?
You're being dramatic.
Right?
Yep.
And then you're thinking to yourself, what? You are shocked and you wonder if he or she is kidding you. You tried all this time to be a perfect, loving, accommodating, and giving as humanly possible, and that wasn't enough. You discounted your own needs and your wants to make the relationship work, and even that wasn't sufficient. So, I have this other client where the wife was always an avid tennis player, and because her husband would always get upset, like, well, you and I don't play tennis. How come you never play tennis with me? Well, first of all, because you suck at it. And that's not really your sport. And also, she liked getting together with her female friends and having tennis games with a girlfriend. But he gave her so much crap that she just slowly pulled back. And over time, she hasn't played tennis. She hasn't played tennis in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So Coach Judith comes on the scene because, he thinks she's the whole problem. And I'm like, well, first of all, you both need to be doing your own thing. So Sally, which isn't her real name,
yep,
start playing tennis with your friends once a week. He didn't like that, but I'm like, too bad.
Yep.
She needs her friend time, even if it was playing tennis by herself on a backboard. She needs time by herself. She needs time without you. She needs to have sports or activities or even a knitting club with other, same-sex friends. I think guys need a guy friend they could go have a beer with, and women that don't let them do that are idiots. You cannot be so possessive that your partner can't go hang out with another guy, or your wife can't go hang out with another woman, because people need friends.
Right.
And, I've talked about this before, and we talked about it in the divorce care support group Monday nights. There isn't a human being out there who can be everything to one person.
Right.
There's no woman or man that can be everything to their partner. They can do it all. There just isn't.
Right.
You have limitations, so then you denied your own feelings or of dissatisfaction, and you kept trying. This is the one this reminds me so much of us and in other relationships. You denied your own feelings of dissatisfaction, but yet you kept trying to be positive and optimistic, right?
Yep.
Now the other person says it's your fault that this relationship isn't working. And they start blaming you. You didn't give enough, or you complained too much, which is funny because you usually complained 5 times a year.
Yeah.
Or you weren't interesting enough, or you weren't sexy enough, or whatever. You just weren't whatever enough. You've just been dumped by a narcissist when they throw these types of things at you. Over my 30 plus years, this is the author, over my 30 plus years of working as a marriage and family therapist, she's from California, I have witnessed many such scenarios. And I too was once dumped by a narcissist. The experience is mind-numbing and devastating. Over the years, it has been my purpose to comfort and heal the family members who are negatively affected by a loved one with narcissistic personality disorder. So many people, including therapists, try to figure out why narcissists do what they do. And there are hundreds of books on that subject. I wrote my first book, Stop Caretaking the Borderline or Narcissist, because there was little written for people who found themselves enmeshed in a relationship with a narcissist or borderline person.
Yeah.
I wanted family members to know that they were being seen and heard. I wanted to tell them there are defined patterns of thinking and feeling that create these insane dramas that they get drawn into. I wanted to show them that they could get out of the drama. I also wanted them to know they could not fix or cure their narcissistic family member, but that they could stop buying into the narcissist's insanity and learn to make a better life for themselves.
Yep.
And that's the hard part. It's basically saying, even if it means walking away from a marriage, I'm going to have a better life.
Yep.
Because what she's really saying here is, make no mistake, with a true narcissist, you will never be able to be on equal footing, and you will never be able to cure them. They can't be cured. It's a disorder.
Yep.
People miss out on that word. Narcissistic personality disorder or borderline personality disorder. Borderlines are often narcissists. That's a separate thing.
Yeah. But much more common, I think.
Right. Yep. This book goes a step further. It's about healing and becoming whole and healthy again after a narcissistic relationship. I did it, and I have helped thousands of people find understanding, learn new skills, and heal in my caretaker recovery groups. So she runs groups for people that were involved with a narcissist. When you're in a close relationship with a narcissist, you inevitably give up yourself, your dreams, your opinions, and even your sense of individuality. You fall into what I call a caretaker pattern, one in which you give up your needs to take care of what the narcissist needs and wants. You have to reverse this pattern in order to regain your emotional health. This book shows you how to do just that. Recovering from a narcissistic relationship can take a lot longer than getting over the end of a typical relationship because you've been on high alert, hypervigilant. So it's like people that are in abusive relationships, right?
Yep.
And you're attuned to his or her every expectation or reaction. Sounds familiar, right?
Yep.
You're attuned to it. It will take some time for your stress hormones to become normal again. You may find that you feel exhausted and you have to regain your strength. Most of all, you'll need to rebuild your sense of self and self-worth. I mean, how many times have you mentioned that?
Yes, because when you're dealing with this type of personality in a relationship, you are giving your best. You're giving everything. You're putting everything into it. And when it's rejected as not enough, that's an incredible hit to your self-image.
Right.
Because you didn't hold back. You didn't take care of yourself at all. You just dove into this and did everything for them. You gave them your best possible effort. Well, if my best possible effort isn't good enough, how good am I? You know, it's devastating to the self-image.
Exactly.
Yep.
And then it says,
when the reality was for that person, nothing is ever enough.
That is absolute. It's never enough.
Yep.
And then I like this sentence. No one gets out of a relationship with a narcissist unscathed.
No.
Right. And again, we're also talking about your kids because they were in that family dynamic. They were part of that family web with the narcissistic borderline personality who is all about them, all about, they're relentless.
I'm sure she touches on this in the book, and she started to touch upon it in the intro. It's a very good point here where it's useless to wonder why the narcissist acts the way they do, because they just do, and you can't change it. It's out of your hands. And again, I think the key turning point in healing here is asking why you stayed involved.
Exactly.
What were you feeding in yourself? What was your need? What was your deficiency that you were feeding by pursuing this? Obviously, again, I'll use the word again, and I don't mean it in the physically abusive way. Because a narcissist relationship is abusive.
It is abusive. Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So why did you continue? You kept doubling down every time you were abused? You kept doubling down, kept pursuing it. Why? You have to start self-examining what it was feeding in you. What was the problem with you that you kept taking the abuse and just putting more in?
Well, and for married couples, it's often, I know it sounds funny, but even today in 2021, people still feel guilty and ashamed, and they almost feel like marked that they're going to be a divorced person.
Yep.
I don't understand it. I sort of do.
It's the Facebook culture, because what's happening is you're looking at the in-laws, you're looking at your sister, perhaps you're looking at your friends, and they all have these perfect marriages because that's what you see on Facebook all the time. They're all vacationing together. They have a nice home. They're having these successes. You don't see what's going on in their homes either. So you just feel like, why can't I have that type of relationship? Well, I got to be honest with you, no one has the Facebook relationship, right?
Well, and part of the problem is people feel so judged, and a lot of times that judgment's not even there. It's in their head.
Yep.
If 50% of the first marriages are ending in divorce, actually divorce in a divorce in marriages is often within the first 4 to 5 years.
Yeah.
I just heard a statistic on that on the radio the other day, but I was driving, so I wasn't able to write it down.
The ironic part of that is the people you think are judging you because of the divorce and the breakup in the relationship probably envy you. It's like, my relationship is not great, but I could never do that because I have too much fear to get out of this relationship.
Right. So I'm going to read the table of contents because we're going to talk about this. I think we might talk about this next week. We might do narcissists for 2 weeks, and then not next week, but the week after. So in 3 weeks, in a couple of weeks, maybe we'll do the profiles. The singles profiles. So here you have the contents which tell you the topics we're going to be talking about. The narcissist and the caretaker. It's all about them, narcissists. Mm-hmm. But what about you? Why relationships with narcissists are always doomed. Okay, so that's the first chapter. The second one is, how could this be over? Because a lot of times you did all the work and the narcissist turns around and breaks up with you. And you're like, wait, I should be breaking up with them. The end game. What just happened? Coping with the end and then letting go. Mm-hmm. Because it's devastating. It's more devastating for us because we put so much effort, too much effort, unhealthy effort.
Right.
There was no 50-50. It was like 95-5, right?
Yep.
Healing after the crash. Grieving, healing self-esteem, rebuilding self-confidence, and loving yourself. And self is like italicized. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that a lot in here.
Yeah.
In our shows, that taking care of yourself and focusing on you, it's not a bad thing. And a lot of people have to work through that. They have to get over that hurdle.
Well, and people are just more interested in getting on to the next relationship than healing themselves. And the problem is when you don't heal yourself, so when you don't ask these questions, why, you just end up repeating the same mistakes. And when you're desperate for a relationship and you tend to settle, and you find relationships, you tend to get too early, overly committed to relationships that you knew weren't going to be good relationships just because you needed to be in a relationship. That's a really bad time to be, they say never go to the grocery store when you're hungry.
Yeah, right.
Never date when you need a relationship. You got to be in a position where you want a relationship, but you don't need it. You're okay. Your life is okay. That's the best position to be dating in.
Right. And then once you heal, you need to be sure that you are giving yourself permission to only date healthy people who have healed from their crappy relationships. So this is why right? You don't
Yep.
meet someone who's still living with Bill or Jane, but they say it doesn't mean anything. It's like, well, when you've been out on your own and you're like fully single again, maybe we'll talk.
That's my that's my second benchmark. First benchmark is, can you go out alone? Can you go to dinner alone? Second benchmark is if you're online dating forever and you're looking through profiles and you say, like, for example, I remember being very leery of women who had only been out of their marriage like for 6 months or something like that. Well, first of all, still struggling with the divorce, still a lot of fighting amongst the kids, still a lot of wrestling with the relationship and healing going on there. I don't want to get involved in that. When I started seeing things that I didn't want to get involved with again, even if sometimes you rejected somebody probably a little too prematurely or emphasized that point a little bit too much, even at that mistake, that's an acceptable mistake in my eyes. I got to the point where I was really worried about things that I didn't want to repeat. I think that's another good benchmark when you start looking at people at, no, I'm not doing that again. I'm not doing the same type of person. I'm not running into the same type of conflict.
Right. Exactly. And then after you start the healing, there's an empowerment section, which is building resistance, right?
Yep.
So that you don't get into that again. Self-protection and becoming independent. That's a really good chapter. We might even start with that one.
Yeah.
And then the last chapter talks about transformation of your life.
Becoming independent is job one. It's job one. Really.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, first she takes people through how to heal.
Right.
And how to work through that. But then it's like, then you have to start focusing on standing your ground, being independent, and being on the lookout. So you have this defense mechanism where you're on the lookout for these, overly charming or, seemingly overly loving kind of people that it's like, why? They're moving awfully quickly. Because a narcissist will often, hate to say it this way, but it's kind of true. I picture it as like the web. The spider web is very invisible and you can't really see it. Sometimes I've walked into them in doorways. It's like gross,
Yep.
But that's how the spider gets the fly. It's not by like, hey, how about you be my dinner tonight? No, thanks.
Yep.
No, they trap and deceive. And it's this invisible thing where you don't even know you're in a web until you're stuck.
Right.
Ooh, good one. I have to remember that. So
keep in mind, narcissists seek out a certain, they're very skilled at picking out a certain type of person.
True. It's true. Yeah.
And so you have to, again, ask the question, why were you that certain type of person?
Right.
And when you get to the point where you need, and again, you're back in a situation where you need the relationship. And if you feel like you need the relationship and that's the top priority, or if you're dating and you need any relationship and that's the top priority, you make poor decisions, because that never should be the top priority.
Right. And then the end part is transforming your life, which is how to deal with forgiveness, because you may have to forgive yourself because you feel you're just beating yourself up. Yep. Or you need to forgive and forget this person. Forgive and move on, I should say, not forget, because you want to remember the lesson from it. Coming home to yourself,
yep.
Finding others to love, and living, you'd like this one, living your intention.
Yep.
Yeah, I know it.
I'll be interested. Yeah.
You're going to want this book, I'm telling you. It's like, this has a lot of Lou-isms in it.
Yeah.
So Nelson Mandela, I'll leave us with this. Nelson Mandela quote at the beginning of the chapter on living your intention. There is no passion to be found in playing small, in settling for a life that is less than the one you are capable of living. Yep. So giving yourself permission to live big, live happily, permission to be happy, permission to not, kowtow to somebody else's every beck and call and wish and desire and demand, right?
Permission to have desires and needs of your own.
And I think it's important to remind people, and sometimes I have to say this, and my clients are like, they have this look like the deer in the headlights, because it's like, wow, that was so simplistic, but it's so true, right? It's like, this is like one, we don't say it that often on the show, but it really is true. Love is a two-way street. And I don't care what the deal is. If, your loved one had a car accident last week, or whatever, yes, you're going to pour more love and support into someone that just had a car accident. They're coming home and they're in a wheelchair.
Sure.
But remember, my husband's best quote based on his past marriage and horrible divorce, was adversity brings out the best in people, or or the worst in people.
Right.
And so now you have a spouse or a partner that came home in a wheelchair after a terrible accident. Are they playing it to their advantage? Like they really can't get their breakfast, or they really can't take the wheelchair into the kitchen and start to rehabilitate?
Right.
That's the person that takes advantage of somebody. So the adversity is creating a monster. Don't let that happen. You need to be strong. You need to put up boundaries.
Yeah, we got here late in the show, but we got to boundaries.
Right.
Boundaries are an important lesson, especially for someone who's dealt with a narcissist, because you've just abandoned all boundaries when you're dealing with a narcissist.
Right. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Like I have this other couple I'm working with, and when she's mad, I don't know about you, but I've been the recipient of this. You get like 1,000 hate emails or text messages, right?
Yep.
The person just can't help themselves. It's like this, like, instead of just saving it for the 6 o'clock argument or whatever, they have to torment you for the entire day and it's abusive.
Yep.
And it's technically it's a form of harassment. But what I teach my clients is, whether I'm working with a couple or I'm working with an individual, you need to set the boundaries, because, it's okay to say it's not okay. Just because you're someone's spouse or it's your live-in partner does not mean that they get to abuse you. And that's the same as verbally abusing. It's just that they've written it out.
Right.
It's not okay. It's not.
Nope.
And, I have a client right now that said, oh my God, the mean text messaging started at 4 a.m. And I'm like, you are just as guilty. You replied. And what I've told you is, don't write anything till 9 a.m. You're teaching them.
Right.
Hey,
reward the behaviors you don't want. It's
right.
Simple, but it works.
Right. So when a crappy text message comes, this other person just can't help themselves. They write one back, or they defend themselves. Like, that's not what happened. But you did this. No. I'm like, why are you having an argument at 4 a.m? And it's not even in person. So no, no, it's a control thing. It's like, this other person probably is a narcissist.
Yep.
In fact, that entire introduction applies to my client's spouse. 100%.
All right. Check out Coach Judith on Facebook. You can get information on the divorce care program as well, which, by the way, isn't sequential. You can join at any time, right?
Yep. Every single week is a different topic. So people that are separated, going through divorce, or post-divorce can join it any week. And we go till the first week of December. So there's plenty of weeks left.
Yep. So check that out. There's a posting on Coach Judith, the Facebook page that you're watching this on. Check out past episodes of the program as well. And we'll see you all next week, right?
That's right. Be well and be healthy, everybody.